Today on Disclosure, we explore the question, what is the mark of the beast? Is it a microchip implanted in the hand or the forehead? Perhaps a barcode or a tattoo of 666? There's a lot of confusion on this important topic, but in a moment, we'll show you how to separate myth from biblical truth right here on Disclosure. Hi, I'm Gary Gibbs, sitting in for Sean Boonstra, who's out of town but will return for the next episode. Who hasn't heard of 666 and the mark of the beast? It's the Bible's most graphic description of end-time terror, and it's frequently dramatized in sermons, books, and movies. But are they really telling us the truth on this vital topic? Or is it just a clever marketing scheme based on creative imagination? I personally believe the hype has created more fear and confusion than enlightenment. Invisible tattoos, credit cards, microcomputer chips, and a host of other things are alleged to be the mark. But instead of clarifying the issue, Bible truth has been buried under a mountain of speculation. So what do you think the mark of the beast is? Well, if you're like most people, your first thought is that it's 666, tattooed in the forehead or on the hand. But do you know the Bible never says that 666 is the mark? It's curious, isn't it? In fact, most people's fear of being somehow coerced to receive this dreaded tattoo is actually more myth than anything else. And today, we will try to separate that myth from reality right here on Disclosure. But before we get to that, it's time to look at the Bible in the news. There was a story that ran in the local Baltimore Sun this past week that should make your hair stand on end, well, at least just a little. Apparently, in March of this year, a group of mediums and psychics will try to speak to the famous American author Edgar Allan Poe. Now, the problem being, of course, that Mr. Poe has been dead since 1849. But still, they're going to try for 2 days. The psychics will gather at an old church building, just a stone's throw from the author's grave, where they'll try in earnest to speak to him from the great beyond. Now, since I live near Baltimore, we sent a camera crew down there to get the pictures that you just saw. And all we found were, some roses that were drying up and dead. But then again, they're no psychics, and neither am I. Well, obviously, though, someone at the paper found this story fascinating because they gave it quite a bit of space. And I have to admit, if you want to have a really creepy seance, well, you probably couldn't pick a better subject than Edgar Allan Poe. He gave us such blood-curdling works as The Raven and The Pit and the Pendulum. I mean, the man just exudes spooky. Well, for all intents and purposes, though, it looks like a publicity stunt. The city of Baltimore has cut funding to the Poe House and Museum, and desperate fans are eager to do something to raise awareness. In fact, it was just last week about 100 people showed up at his headstone to celebrate his 203rd birthday, but that wasn't enough. So now they're going to try to have him speak from beyond the grave. But what are the odds that the famous poet might actually reward his fans and show up? Well, according to the Bible, absolutely zero. For the Bible, speaking of the dearly departed, tells us, never more will they have a share in anything done under the sun. And then Psalm 115 says that the dead actually go down into silence. In other words, they don't come back. And really, it's a dangerous game to try and second-guess God on this matter, because Bible prophecy points very clearly to a time in Revelation when spirits of demons will delude the masses. Friend, when God says we can't speak to the dead, He warns us for a reason. Now, it's not because nothing ever happens at a seance, but it's because sometimes something does happen, and that's not good news. If somebody actually shows up at the seance in March, listen, it's not going to be Edgar Allan Poe because God says that's impossible. So then we're faced with the question, if something does happen, and again, I'm not saying it will, exactly who are those psychics talking to? On the surface, it looks like fun and games, but lurking beneath the surface is something, or perhaps someone, you really don't want to meet. Now, in just a moment, Jim Ayer from Adventist World Radio and Pastor Don Mackintosh will join me for our study on the Mark of the Beast. It's one of the most widely recognized prophecies in the Bible, also the most misunderstood. But we'll look at some frequently overlooked scriptures that you've probably never thought about before in this way. So tell your friends to join the program and don't go away. I'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Gary Gibbs sitting in for Sean Boonstra, who's out of town. Today we're studying the Mark of the Beast, and I want to hear from you. What do you think it is? 666, barcode, computer chip? Do you think the mark is coming soon, or do you feel it's more Hollywood than reality? Give me a call. Let's talk on the program. You can reach me right here at Hope Channel at 888-730-HOPE. That's 4673. Mark of the Beast, what do you think it is? Let me hear from you. And also, we have a free study guide to give you that covers today's topic. It's called the Mark of the Beast Issue. This study guide is packed with helpful information that will enable you to better understand the Mark of the Beast. And it's yours free, but you need to contact me by going to our website. We'll email you a copy of the study guide the first business day after we get your request. And listen, if you can, please provide your full name and address. Now, let me introduce my first guest to you, Jim Ayer. He's host of the television program Making Waves that plays right here on Hope Channel, and he's also vice president for Adventist World Radio. Jim's made an in-depth study of the prophecies. He frequently teaches in Bible seminars around the world. And Jim, it's a pleasure having you here on Disclosure.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Gary. Thank you for having me.
Well, we have a big topic, the Mark of the Beast. We'll probably not cover it all in just the next 50 minutes or so. But I'd like to delve right into what I talked about at the top of the program. Most everybody thinks that the mark is 666. Is that really what the Bible says?
Gary, let me start out by saying, you know, when I first became a Christian, I went to a religious leader in my community and I said, what does Revelation talk about? Tell me about Revelation. I want to know. Oh, Jim, he says, you can't understand Revelation. John had his head in the clouds and you just can't understand it. Well, I went away from there thinking, that doesn't seem right because revelation means the revealing, the uncovering of truth. And so I think today we're going to find out you can uncover the truth. God wants us to understand.
That's right. And the book, though, is steeped in a lot of symbols, and tonight we're going to look at what those symbols mean. So let's just jump in right now to this 666 business that we see popularized everywhere. What does the Bible actually say about it? Is it the mark?
Sounds good. Well, let's look at Revelation chapter 13, and maybe while folks are getting their Bibles and turning there, I want to say, you know, all of the Bible is about worship. And even in heaven, it started out with the devil fighting God over who was going to worship who. And the devil has never stopped. And this records the worship of either God or the devil. And so as we get into this, let's look at Revelation chapter 13. We're going to go to verse 16. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their hands or in their foreheads. And they can't buy or sell. They can't do any of these things because they have this mark. Verse 18 says, here's wisdom. Let he who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is a man, and the number is 666.
Okay, so the number is 666. But
notice,
is that the mark?
Yeah, that's not the mark. It's simply another identifier of this beast power.
In fact, when I look at this text here, there's a little two-letter word that jumps out at me in verse 17. It says, no one can buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name.
Yeah,
that sounds like a list of three, right?
Exactly. And like I say, the mark is separate. The mark is what the beast gives you, but the other is an identifying characteristic of that beast power.
I was visiting with a friend of mine who's a Greek scholar, and I said, tell me what the Greek says here. And he pulls it up on his iPhone, and he's looking at the Greek, and he says, well, the Greek indicates it's a list of 3 items. Now, I recognize that some translations, like the New International Version, puts it as 2 items, but it's still, the number is different than the mark.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the people have done so many things to try and confuse this. And the Bible really unfolds itself. And we're going to be looking at some of that soon. But yeah, 666, they call it 666. It's actually 666. And
So I wonder why people are so confused on it. I mean, what's behind that? Why is that the popular idea?
well, I think some of this, Gary, has to do with God does couch the Bible in various terms, because if everybody could just come in, whether you're a Christian or not, and just read it, they probably would have destroyed it long ago, because it really nails down who these beast powers are, who's the controlling powers in Earth's history, and so they wouldn't like that. And so God lays it out only for those people who have received the Holy Spirit, who walk with Him, so they can understand this incredible book. It's very simple as it interprets itself, and which we need to do.
Yeah, and I wonder if, popular movies like Left Behind and book series like that, study Bibles. I find a lot of people read the notes in the study Bibles instead of reading the Bible for itself. I mean, that's a perfect example right here in Revelation chapter 13, where it says or, and yet the footnotes will say the mark of the beast is 666.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with that.
No.
Yeah.
And here's a mistake that I think that a lot of people make, Jim. They look at what the Bible means. They want to know, what does it mean, before they ever figure out what it says.
What it says, exactly. You're right on.
So here's what we want to do. We want to delve into Revelation 13 right now. And if you've got a pen and paper, you can just follow along. We're going to give you what it says, just verse by verse here. You write it down, and then we'll look at what does it mean. So walk us through Revelation 13, kind of a quick overview of it, and tell us, what does it say verse by verse.
It is going to have to be quick, right? Short program. Okay, let's look at chapter 13, beginning at verse 1. Then I stood on the bank of the sea and saw a beast rising up out of the sea. Okay, so this is our first beast. We see a beast rising up out of the sea. Later we actually find that sea is an area of great population, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on the horns 10 crowns, and on its head a blasphemous name. Only Jesus was crucified because he blasphemed God, supposedly. So this is a religious power that comes up. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, feet of a bear, mouth like a lion. All these various animals portray this incredible beast. Down to verse 11, we'll skip over here a little bit. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. Different than the sea. This beast is in an area where there isn't a great population. We could find that out in other areas of the Bible too. Had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke as a dragon. Who is the dragon? The dragon's the devil. We find that in chapter 12. So 2 beasts in this situation. Now,
so the first one blasphemes, and the second one speaks like the dragon. So the first point is there are 2 beasts in Revelation 13.
absolutely 2 beasts.
And we'll come back to what that means later. We're just charting. What does it say? Okay.
Now, verse 14, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth. Who? Everybody that dwells on the earth. He deceives those by the signs which he's granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast. Image is icon, basically an icon. In the Greek, it's an icon. Who was wounded and lived. So here's this one beast making an image to the other beast.
Okay, so that's the second thing it says. The lamb-like beast makes an image to the first beast.
Right, exactly. Now, he was granted power. He's given power to give breath to the image of the beast, and the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So here's a very interesting part now. You've got, it's covering the whole earth, and here is basically a death decree. You're commanded to worship this beast on pain of death.
Okay, so 2 points there. The image is set up. People are commanded to worship it, and if they don't, then they're threatened with death.
Yeah, this is no small thing. This is what everybody should understand and realize, because this is real stuff.
Okay, what's our next point?
And then verse 16, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave. How many people does that encompass?
That's everybody.
That's everybody, because everybody fits in one of those categories. So it's named everybody to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. So here's another situation of these people. It's a global event, and they're going to receive a mark. And the mark is what we need to understand. Now, we go down to verse 18, and here's wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. So here's this identifying mark of the beast. It's the number of a man. His number is 666. It's not a mark again, but this is an identifying mark of this beast power so we can understand and identify who this beast is. It behooves us, Gary, to understand that, since we may have to decide whether we're going to
so the
worship.
number 666 is somehow connected to this false worship.
Absolutely.
So let me summarize what we found, what it says here. It says that two powerful beasts will unite together and institute false worship and command everyone to bow down to it. And if they don't, then they will be economically boycotted and threatened with death, right?
Absolutely.
Now, Jim, listen, are we expecting, when I read this the first time many years ago as a person studying Buddhism, I thought, are real beasts going to come crawling up out of the sea and, like some science fiction horror movie, and attack Washington, D.C. or the Kremlin? Is that what this is saying?
No, well, it'd be kind of fun to see that, but no, that's not the case.
Not when I live here by Washington, D.C. It would not be fun to see.
This is not a horror movie. This is real stuff. But God couches these things and lays them out in very symbolic ways. So again, the particular powers maybe that are going to enforce these things don't read themselves into it and say, man, I'm going to get rid of this Bible. I'm going to throw the whole thing out. I'm going to burn it. I'm going to destroy it.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question.
So nobody knows.
In 30 seconds, what's the symbolism? Give me an example of the symbolism for a beast. What is a beast?
Well, basically, even today we use symbols in the United States. The eagle. The eagle's on our flag. But you go back in the book of Daniel. Daniel's an incredible book that really unveils a lot of what's going on in Revelation, and God laid out many beasts there. The lion at that time was Babylon, represented Babylon. But here today we've got the beaver, represents Canada. We've got the lion today that represents England. So today we still use beasts and animals to portray these very things.
And that's what Daniel saw in Daniel 7 when he was talking to the angel. The angel said, I'll make you know the interpretation of this. And he says the first kingdom, the first beast is the kingdom.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so that's what we have there.
Again, Gary, the Bible explains itself. Just what you just went to, the Bible explains itself. We don't have to guess.
Well, we've talked about what it says, but what does it mean? And we'll start answering this question when we return in just a moment. But remember, before we go to our break, let me remind you that you can get your own information-packed study guide of our topic tonight on the Mark of the Beast. All you have to do is go to our website and click on the free offer tab. Enter your information and we'll send it to you. And if you don't have internet access, you can just give us a call at the number on your screen. Also, I want to hear from you in the program tonight. I want to talk with you. What do you think the Mark of the Beast is? Or perhaps you have a question about the mark. You can call me. If you live in the United States at 730-HOPE, that's 4673, or go to our website. When we return, we start unpacking what is the Mark of the Beast with Pastor Don Mackintosh, who will share an often overlooked story in the Bible that unravels this mystery. We're looking at the Mark of the Beast issue tonight, and we've already learned some astounding things. First, 666 is not the Mark of the Beast. But what is it? Well, I want to talk to you about it, and in a moment we'll go to the phone. So give me a call and let's talk prophecy. Do you have a question about the mark? Does the Mark of the Beast frighten you? Give me a call. We'll talk about it. You can reach me at 888-730-HOPE. That's 4673. Or you can text us or go to our website and reach us through Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Now, Pastor Don Mackintosh joins us from Ohio, where he's traveling. Don's a good friend of mine, as well as a deep student of Bible prophecy. Most recently, he was with Amazing Facts. He's now working with Weimar Health Institute in college. Welcome, Don, to Disclosure.
Hi, Gary. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Listen, you and I have studied the prophecies quite a bit, and you're very well read on this and studied on it. And we were just talking about all the confusion as to what the Mark of the Beast is. And you may have just heard me talk about how the common misconception that it's 666 is not supported by the Scripture. So those 2 points we just made are the mark is not 666, and there are powerful end-time rulers and kingdoms who set up an image of false worship to deceive people. Now, Don, there's another text in the Bible that I think is often overlooked that really sheds a lot of light here on Revelation 13. What can you tell us about that text?
Right, exactly. I mean, when you look at Revelation chapter 13, of course, it's power-packed. It has all kinds of symbolism, and you guys have been unpacking that, like the beast being kingdoms and nations and different things. But, you know, the parallel book with the book of Revelation is, of course, the book of Daniel. They sort of go together, and in fact, I like reading them right alongside each other. And one of the parallels you see that's just great, and often overlooked when we're studying the book of Revelation, chapter 13 especially, is Daniel chapter 3. So I want to invite you to look there in Daniel chapter 3, and we'll look there, and I think what's an interesting parallel. Would that be okay?
Let's do that. Why don't you do the same thing that Jim just did for us in Revelation, and walk us through the high points of Daniel 3, and let's see how they parallel.
Okay, let's look in Daniel chapter 3, and let's look first of all at verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So right there, what do you have? You have a powerful ruler, you have a powerful leader, just like we saw in Revelation chapter 13. And then you also have a familiar number. You know, in Revelation 13, it talks about 666, but here you have this 60 cubits times 6 cubits, 60 by 6. Mm-hmm. So that harkens to that. So you have a powerful world leader, and you have also an image that's being set up. Sounds very, very familiar. Now look down at verse 3 and 4. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of that image, same image again, that Nebuchadnezzar, again, that world power had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Look at verse 4. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, the psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship that image." So again, you have a global gathering. Everyone is coming together to worship that image. And you have the ambiance being set by a powerful world leader. He tries to make it look good. I mean, he's got all kinds of music. It doesn't matter what you want to listen to. If you like jazz, we've got that for you.
Almost sounds music like a political rally. He's just rallying everybody.
Yeah, it's just like in the background you have the music playing, you know, and it's very palatable, at least it seems, but then it gets sinister. In other words, you know, there's a little bit of cyanide in the stew. There's a little bit of arsenic in the dip. Look at verse 6. Whoever does not fall down and worship, it says, whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace. So there you have it again.
Well, that just kills the party right there, Don. I mean, it's like either dance to the music or you're going in the furnace.
That's right, and that's the same thing in Revelation 13. So you can see those parallels. You know, you have a powerful world leader, you have the image, you have everyone gathered together, and then, of course, you have this idea that you all need to bow down. And if you don't, just a little small thing, I know we have the nice music, if you don't do it, you're going to be killed.
Well, it's amazing. It's amazing the parallel here, Jim, that you just put Daniel 3 right next to Revelation 13. It's the same thing. Don, thank you for that. Gentlemen, let's begin to unpack that now, okay? We have looked at what it says. Now let's kind of dig in and start trying to find out what does it mean. And Jim, I want to go to you first. Take me back to Daniel chapter 3. Daniel lived, 600 years. It begins 605 BC before Jesus. What was taking place in the context of Daniel chapter 3 at that time? Why would the king set up a golden image and say, bow down and worship this?
Well, just before that in Daniel 2, God gave the king an incredible dream in which really it was a vision, and Daniel explained it to him and laid out all of the kingdoms from his time all the way through to our day. I mean, thousands of years. God is the God who steps in and out of time.
It's a remarkable prophecy. In fact, Pastor Boonstra, Pastor Sean, he actually went through Daniel 2 in our first program with Pastor Doug Batchelor of Amazing Facts and showed how that was a multi-metalled image, head of gold, breast and arms of silver. The head of gold, of course, representing Babylon, the breast and arms of silver, Medo-Persia, would overthrow Babylon. It wasn't good news to the king, was it?
It's interesting. Each metal is less precious, but every one becomes stronger. So you start up here with Nebuchadnezzar as the head of gold. You go all the way down to the legs of iron. You know, a lot more powerful, but not worth near as much. So now we've got this situation. We get to Nebuchadnezzar now. It's about 9 years later. Nebuchadnezzar had this vision and dream that Daniel explained to him 9 years ago. And in kind of this 10th year, all of a sudden we know from a tablet that was found that there was a huge uprising in his army. So there was a chance he was going to be overthrown. And he says, look, I am not going to be overthrown. I'm not going to have this prophecy come true. I am all gold. My whole kingdom is gold. So he builds this huge master image there on the plains of Dura and has everybody to worship.
You know, I actually saw that clay tablet at the British Museum.
Did you?
In London, and I took a picture. I brought it for the program tonight, and I'd like for you to see it as well. It's from December 594 BC, and it records a serious mutiny that erupts in the Babylonian army. And here's a quote from it. It says this, if you can bring that up for me, thank you. Nebuchadnezzar slew many of his own army, his own hand captured his enemy. And what's remarkable is that this historical artifact confirms and gives insight as to why Nebuchadnezzar is doing this. He's trying to root out any other people who are involved in this coup attempt.
So now he builds this huge image out there on the plain. It's a flat plain so he can see everybody. He's got this mighty furnace burning, and he wants to find out who on earth is there that's going to go against him. He just dares anybody to go against him at that moment.
Okay, so here's what I get out of this, is that if we're looking at this in light of the mark of the beast, then what does this tell us? It seems like he's taking a truth of God that was in Daniel 2, the multi-metalled image in Daniel 2, that was designed to teach a truth, and what's he doing?
Yeah, he perverts it. He twists it just a little bit. Same good-looking image, but he twists it just a little. It's exactly what the devil does.
To teach an error.
To teach an error.
And to get people into false worship instead of true worship.
Remember we talked about in the beginning, it's all about worship. Who do we worship, God or the devil? This is the same thing. God is happy if we worship through anybody as long as we're not worshiping God.
Hey, Don, you mentioned earlier 666, and you pointed out here in Daniel 3 that this image is 60 cubits by 6 cubits. What's the connection there?
Well, you know, that's really 90 feet tall by 9 feet, but this idea of 6 is a very common number in Babylon, and it forms the basis for many things that you see in the Babylonian culture. I have a book in my library called, Life Begins at Sumer, and it studies all of the uses of 6 in the Babylonian culture. And many of the things we see today we don't realize actually came from that culture, and there's many books written on this. But for instance, the apothecary system, that's the system that's used in medicine, where it tells you how many grains are in a gram and all these different things. It's always built around 60. Something that's maybe more common to our viewers would be how many seconds are there in a minute?
60 seconds in a minute.
Yeah, 60 seconds. And, of course, you've heard someone, they say, well, I did a 360. Well, what does that mean?
360 degrees in a circle.
It means they live in Baltimore and the street is icy and they do the 360 with their car, right? So they turn around in 60. So it's a multiple of 6 again. And they would use this number 6, in very different ways. They believed it was so powerful they would use it for magic charms. They had their magic charms, and on the magic charm itself, you would actually, see this sequence of numbers when you went from, left to right. You'd add them up in their columns. And as you added them all up, it would be like 111, and then it went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they would add that up, and it was 666.
I think we actually have a picture of that, Don. I want our viewers to be able to see. And you can put that up.
Okay, yeah. So those magic charms, maybe you put those up. So yeah, these magic charms, exactly. And then you can see that column moving there from the left. If you're looking at the screen to the right, adds up to 111, and then the second column 111, all the way down, and you would add it up. And interestingly enough, many of their charms would add up to 666. And also, these were mathematicians. I mean, have you ever heard of lying with statistics? The Babylonians were very good at doing statistics, and sometimes today I think people are Babylonian as well. So there were also mystic numbers. They would add up the number 1 plus the number 2 plus the number 3 plus the number 4. I think you have this graphic too. And plus the number 5. And you can see that you would add all the way up sequentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way up there through 36. And if you added those all together, it equaled 666. Now, this was just something. They would point all these things out. Even today, I think, Gary, this gets people's attention. Whenever we talk about 666, you know, it suddenly people say, ooh, you know. So this idea of 666 was huge in that culture.
So the Nebuchadnezzar then is intentional in building this image that size. They measured everything in a cubit back then, because it's all part of his false worship. So, and the Bible in Revelation talks about 666. What's something that we can deduce then from this number, this magical number 6 being a part of paganism?
Well, you know, if 666 stands for something that's connected with idol worship and something that's connected with basically breaking the commandments, then in essence, when you bow to this number of 666, it's a part of a package where you're denying, you know, the God of heaven, who I think his favorite number is probably number 7.
All right, so our point here is then this counterfeit worship connected to this beast is related to ancient pagan worship that dates all the way back to Babylon. Excellent stuff, Don. And Don and Jim, we're going to take a break right now, and we'll come back and we'll continue unpacking this. And I want to remind you that you can get your own information-packed study guide of our topic tonight on the Mark of the Beast. And all you have to do, just go to our website, click on the free offer tab. It's at the very top of the web page. You enter your information, and we'll send it to you. Now, if you don't have internet access, you can call us toll-free here in the U.S. and Canada, 888-730-HOPE. That's 4673. And also, I'd like to hear from you. Give me a call. I want to talk with you right here on the program. What do you think the mark is? Do you have a question about the Mark of the Beast? Give me a call, and let's talk prophecy. You can also reach us on Facebook and Twitter, or our website. You can text us as well. Now, we'll be back in just a moment to continue unpacking what is the Mark of the Beast. Welcome back. We're studying an amazing and explosive topic, the Mark of the Beast. And if you're just joining us, I want to encourage you to be sure to contact us to get your free copy of the study guide, The Mark of the Beast issue. You can get that simply by visiting our website. Click on the free offer tab at the top of the page. And again, if you don't have an internet access, we're just a phone call away. You can call the number on your screen. And listen, I'd like to hear from you. Let's talk prophecy. We're getting ready to go to our phones, and you can be part of the program. Tell us, how do you feel about the Mark of the Beast, and what do you think it is? Perhaps you have a question for our panel. So call me right now so you can get in line, and let's talk prophecy. The information is right there on your screen. Well, now our guest hosts here are Jim Ayer and Don Mackintosh, and we want to continue, gentlemen, unpacking this topic here. And we just talked about the size of the image, Jim, and the 666. Don unpacked that for us. What else can we learn from comparing Daniel with Revelation?
Well, I hope everybody by this time has got their Bibles and they're going along with us. So let's go to Daniel chapter 3 and verse 7. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the gold image. Keep your finger there, and let's go over to Revelation chapter 13 and verse 16. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark in their right hand or in their forehead. This is absolutely all-inclusive. The whole world is involved in this, Gary.
So it is a global event. All the world is commanded to follow this false worship.
Yes, nobody's excluded. Unless, I'll leave that unless there to figure it out.
We'll have to come back to that then, okay? Now, Don, what do you have next for us?
Well, it looks like, you know, Daniel is being repeated in Revelation. In other words, what we're seeing in Daniel, Revelation is indicating is going to happen again. And I think this is, you know, this is the main point. We have to see that history repeats itself. And let's look at what the history says in Daniel chapter 3, verse 16 through 18. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, these were, of course, the Hebrews that had been taken captive, answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, and he was the king of Babylon, we have no need to answer you in this matter. What had happened in verse 15, it's clear that they had been called to, bow down and worship. Now look at verse 17. If that is the case, in other words, if you're going to throw us into the fiery furnace, our God, who we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up.
So out of that great crowd, only 3 men refused to bow down. Why was that?
Yeah, well, these people, these 3 are worthies. I mean, you go all the way back to Daniel chapter 1. They had a track record of living by the word of God. They didn't just waffle with the political campaigns of their day. They didn't just go one way or the other based on attack ads. What they did was they said, look, here's God's word, we're going to live by that. And they wanted to follow, God's will and his way. It's interesting to me that this mark, has something to do with them bowing down. They would never have done that because that was one of the 10 commandments. And, they didn't bow down to images. That's the second commandment. So they just wouldn't do that. Likewise, at the end, at the end of time, you see the same thing. You look at Revelation 14, right after Revelation 13. And it says there in 14, verse 12, here is the patience of the saints. That word patience means they're under pressure. This is what saints do under pressure. Here's the patience of the saints. Here are those that, even under pressure, what do? They keep the commandments of God. Why? Not because they're great people, but it's because they have the faith of Jesus. Jesus, gives them his spirit, which is his faith, which leads to obedience, and they're patient, they're obedient, they're faithful.
So perfect parallel. In Daniel 3, those who are loyal to God don't fall down and worship that false worship image. They keep God's commandments. Same thing in the end times. They keep God's commandments.
But Gary, just as you said.
And also there's only just a very few of them. There's only 3. And that reminds me of chapter 12, verse 17. In Revelation 12:17, it indicates that there would only be a remnant. The dragon was wroth with the woman, which is a word for the church. And he went to make war with the remnant. That's just that little small group of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So it's a small group. They're obedient to the commandments, even when they're under extreme pressure.
Okay, I want to put those 2 points up. Thanks. This counterfeit worship contradicts God's law, and that's our 6th point. And then our 7th is, while many compromise, a faithful few stand loyally for God. I think Jim wanted to jump in here. Jim?
I just wanted to say that faithfulness, as Don had mentioned, just doesn't happen overnight. It's something they worked on in a relationship for all their lives to come to this moment.
Yeah, they're not going to give themselves to the fiery furnace just all of a sudden.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen. They had to be putting in the bank, making deposits all the time, and that day they withdrew a big chunk.
What happened to them in the fiery furnace, Jim?
Well, let's look at that actually. Daniel chapter 3 again, verses 27. And 27 says, and the satraps, all the administrators, all these people, I'll skip down a little bit, but to the important part, on whose bodies the fire had no power, the hair of their heads was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire wasn't on them.
They went into the fire.
Yeah, a real fire. And matter of fact, this fire was so hot that it burned up all the guards that threw them in.
Wow.
It's an amazing fire. But Nebuchadnezzar looked and he saw one standing in there. He says, it's like the Son of God. Who is that? Jesus was in there with them. And he's the commander of fire. He's the creator. He can do anything. And so he made that fire just a nice cool bath for them. They came out. They smelled wonderful. God delivered them.
God delivers them. And that's the last point. A lot of people get really freaked out over the mark of the beast thing, and they forget that God delivers his people.
Absolutely.
Don?
Absolutely.
The fascinating thing is, Nebuchadnezzar has this burning fiery furnace. It's what he used to probably put the metal together to put the statue up. He didn't want people looking at the fiery furnace that much, except for maybe to, remind them to bow down. It probably was behind them, not right next to the statue. And instead of looking at his statue, now they're all turned around and they're looking at the Hope Channel, because now now that fiery furnace is turned into a big screen plasma TV, and it looked like a place that was going to be horrendous and hateful, and it was going to lead to their death. But now they're on Channel 1. And they're on the Hope Channel.
Channel 360, that's actually Channel 368 on DirecTV if you're watching here in the U.S.
And Don, that's the next verse. That's the next verse, because then it said Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be to the God of heavens," you know.
That's right. So they do a 360, okay, or 368, and they turn around and they look at that channel, and they see this wonderful thing. One thing that people don't often pick up on, there's two versions of chapter 3. There's the regular version that our King James and other translations are based on. There's a Septuagint version that has all kinds of extra text verses, but they basically are a song. So the indication is not only were they in the fiery furnace, but they were singing a song. So instead of singing the songs of Babylon and bowing down, here they are praising God. Their lives are based on his promises. And in the midst of what would seem like a fear-producing prophecy, here they are rejoicing. It's a wonderful thing.
They had a real worship song going on.
Amen. God delivers. Well, listen, thank you guys. And we're not done yet. After a quick break, we're going to your calls and questions. So grab that phone, text us, visit our website. Let me hear from you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've been studying the Mark of the Beast issue, and we've learned some very insightful things thanks to our guests, Jim Ayer and Pastor Don Mackintosh. Well, now it's your turn. You can be part of the program. You can call us at 888-730-HOPE. That's 4673. Text us. I'll receive it right here on my iPad. Or you can go to the web and reach us at hopetv.org/disclosure, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, many ways to be part of the program. Gentlemen, we just covered a lot of material. I want to review it just in bullet point form for our viewers again. If you've been following along, here's what we've learned so far. Number one, the mark is not 666. We find that in Revelation 13. Powerful end-time kingdoms lead the world to establish the mark. Point number 3, the mark slightly alters the true worship of God. Number 4, the counterfeit worship is related to ancient pagan traditions. And then fifthly, all the world is commanded to follow this false worship. And this counterfeit worship contradicts God's law. And while many compromise, a faithful few stand loyally for God. And lastly, point number 8, God delivers his people.
Amen.
Well, Jim and Don, we've learned a lot so far about the Mark of the Beast. Obviously, we haven't been exhaustive. We haven't revealed it all yet.
That's very true. Matter of fact, can I give one
Sure.
more point on here? One of the things as we look at the Hebrew worthies that are standing on that plain, as they stood up, that was basically the seal of God. Their lives were sealed by God as they were standing there. The Mark of the Beast were all those people bowing down to this false image, to this false worship idol.
Yeah, there are actually two kind of marks. There's the seal of God mentioned in Revelation 14, verse 1, and then there's the mark of the beast, and they stand in opposition to each other. Don, let me go to you first. I have a caller who didn't want to go on the air, but they gave our call screeners their information, their question here. Mike called, and he wants to know if the mark of the beast will be actually implanted into the hand. And he didn't mention this, but the Bible also says the head. Are we looking for something physically implanted?
No, I think the whole book of Revelation is a symbolism. Of course, you would first of all, exactly as Mike does, you would look at it and say, is there a literal application, or is this chapter really talking in symbolic terms? And you got to say it's symbolic terms. You got, in Revelation 13, you've got beasts. They're coming out of the sea. They're coming out of the land. And so you would look for a symbolic application, and you wouldn't be looking for that kind of literal thing. And remember, in our first point, we said there was, the mark, his number, and his name. We were differentiating between those.
Yes. Jim, thank you, Don. Here's a message from Jared. And he asks, where was Daniel in chapter 3? We see him in Daniel chapter 1 and Daniel chapter 2. Was he bowing down or something?
Well, I think it's a very good question. Where was Daniel? In all likelihood, because we know Daniel has been faithful all the way through, and later on he's also faithful, far past this kingdom. So Daniel probably had to go away on business or something. He was someplace else. Whatever the situation was, God removed him from this moment for a specific reason.
Okay, so he's still alive.
Yep, absolutely.
Because he's on the front end of Daniel 3 and he's after Daniel 3. He's still alive and he's still faithful, because in Daniel 6, he actually will not compromise his faith, and he's thrown into the lion's den.
Thrown in the lion's den, yeah.
So he's not a compromiser. Yes, Don.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like, we never have the president and the vice president in the same place, right? And Daniel was very valuable. He was probably at an undisclosed location, is the way we'd say it today. Some people think he was in Susa, the other palace. The king was trying to put down a mutiny, and so he wanted to have perhaps Daniel, a very trustworthy fellow, somewhere else.
Okay, and I think that's symbolic that God's going to take some people out of the way before this happens. A lot of people are afraid of, do we go through the tribulation or not? And I think this indicates some people will, some people won't, and we just need to trust God. Now, we have a caller who's on the phone, and caller, why don't you share with us your name first?
My name is Steve.
Welcome to the program, Steve. Where are you from?
I'm from Nebraska.
Well, excellent. Well, what's your question for our panel, Steve?
You guys actually just answered my first question, but I have a second question.
Okay.
The second question would be, in Revelation chapter 13, verse 16, it says there, on their right hand, and what is the significance of the right hand?
Okay, which one of you guys would like to take that?
I'll talk about that a little bit.
Go ahead, Don.
Steve, that's an excellent question, and a couple years ago, I decided I'd study every text in the Bible that has to do with the right hand. It's interesting when you go back, for instance, to Deuteronomy. Go back to Deuteronomy with me just for a minute. In Deuteronomy, you have something I think is fascinating. In Deuteronomy chapter 33 and verse 2, here's what it says. The Lord came from Sinai and dawned on them from Seir. He shone forth from Mount Paran. He came with 10,000s of his saints. Now notice this part. From his right hand came a fiery law for them. So God's right hand was the hand that he used to actually write his law. Interestingly also, if you go to Exodus chapter 15, and in Exodus chapter 15, it's fascinating to me that the God who, wrote the law with his right hand was also the God who delivered with his right hand. Look at chapter 15, verse 6. Your right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, has dashed the enemy to pieces. And then his right hand led them, verse 12. You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them up. And then that right hand led them, if you read the rest of that chapter, all the way to the sanctuary, God's sanctuary, where his law is in the wilderness. Now, here's the point. The right hand, Steve, as I've studied it, is related to two things in the Old Testament at least. It's related to God's law, but in two aspects. First of all, God's law as the creator. He created with his right hand. There's several texts that indicate that. But God's law also as redeemer. And in the Old Testament, two times God's law is given. Once in the book of Exodus, and it's related to creation. Once in the books of Deuteronomy, and it's related to redemption. So what the devil tries to do is take the focus off God's creative and redemptive right hand and try and focus the fact that he can change even the right hand mentality of people at the end of time.
Wow.
But what we saw in Daniel chapter 3 and what we see in Revelation is that there are a people that they say, no. I believe that Christ is going to stand at the right hand of the Father for me. He's my right-hand brother, and I'm his right-hand man. So, Steve, you point out something that I think we often overlook in this chapter, and that is that this right hand is a key that points us to the creative and redemptive Redeemer, and he's the one that's going to stand for us.
Well, thank you, Don. I think that's very insightful. And Jim, we have another question here from Simon from Facebook. We've got a minute.
Okay.
Who is the beast?
Who is the beast? Well, I think we're going to have to wait till the next episode for that. I can answer that one pretty easily because that's a big study, but it's an incredible study, and the Bible tells who it is.
And Sean will go through that here on Disclosure, but let me give you some clues. Go look at Daniel chapter 7. Now, to do that, you need to go back to Daniel chapter 2 and review that. Pastor Sean did a program on that. It's on our website. You can go watch it. And compare Daniel 2 with 7, because Daniel 2 unlocks chapter 7. And first chart, what does it say? And you'll see parallel kingdoms. And the angel actually interprets Daniel 7 for us right there in the text. And then what you'll do is go to history and find out who that little horn is. When you do that, go to Revelation 13 and look at the parallels between Daniel 7 and Revelation 13. And then come back to Disclosure and watch this when Pastor Sean reveals who the beast's power is. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you. Don Mackintosh, Pastor Don, thank you for joining us and making time in your busy schedule and for the insights you provided today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And Jim, thank you. You're very busy with Adventist World Radio and making waves. Thank you for coming here and making a few waves too.
Thank you very much.
Well, when we return, I'll share with you what I see as the most important thing that we can learn from the Bible when it comes to the mark of the beast. Well, the mark of the beast topic can be very frightening if you allow it, but it doesn't have to be. Revelation is a revelation of Jesus Christ. Yes, it talks about the beast and it talks about last day events, and often this is what people get hung up on. Now, while we need to know what we can about these things, we must never lose sight of Jesus. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't lose sight of Jesus. They knew their God and they were committed to Him. And because of their loyalty, God was loyal to them. He walked with them in the fire and He delivered them. And He'll do that for His people even today. Now, here's what I consider the most important truth in these passages. Stay true to God. Don't ever give up or give in to the temptations that the enemy of souls throws at you. I mean, you may be facing some major decisions right now in your life where you're tempted to compromise what you know is true and what is right. You know, God didn't deliver Shadrach and his friends until after they were in the furnace. So no matter what you're going through, I want to encourage you to trust God. Don't compromise your faith. He will step in. He'll deliver you. He'll honor you. Now, another thing that concerns people when it comes to the mark of the beast is they're afraid that they're going to go through this tribulation. And they've bought into what I believe is some unbiblical teachings about a secret rapture. The Bible says every eye will see Him, that it won't be secret. We'll leave that topic for a future disclosure. In fact, talking about future disclosures, on the next program, Pastor Sean Boonstra is back. And he's going to look at Daniel 5 and what it has to say about the Battle of Armageddon. Is there really going to be a massive war in Palestine, or is there something decidedly more personal? Till next time, I'm Gary Gibbs for Disclosure.